Welcome back, everybody, to the Christian Show. I'm kind of giving up on the news because when I do that, I just end up talking too long, and that's why there wasn't an episode last week because I ran into a technical issue just because of how long I recorded. I recorded well over an hour, and it just didn't work. So I'm going to redo the third segment, and that's kind of all I'm going to focus on for the foreseeable future is just the scripture because I'm studying to be a pastor. This is kind of my area of expertise and will definitely be my area of expertise in the future. So that's what we're talking about for now. As I said 2 weeks ago, we will be starting in the Gospel of John, and we will just be going through it, talking about, talking about the Gospel as we go through. So, let's begin. Here we go. The Gospel according to John, from the New King James Version. Starting in chapter 1, verse 1, we are reading through verse 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Now, this first foray into the Gospel of John will basically be an overview of John and how it differs from the Synoptic Gospels. And something that my church has always done is they read an Old Testament reading whenever they talk about the New Testament, that an Old Testament reading that kind of ties into the New Testament and foreshadows it in some way or prophesies about it. So we'll be doing that. We'll do that at the end. In this episode, we'll probably in the future read Old Testament, then New Testament, and then talk. So, since this is an overview, it'll be formatted a little different, but here we go. The Gospel according to John is unique among the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It is the one that is not a synoptic gospel, so that is interesting. What the synoptic gospels are, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they are very, very similar, and they kind of cover the same method of talking about Jesus. They contain parables, they contain miracles, and it's just a very historical telling of Jesus' life. Now, John is different than the other three because John is more about Jesus' divinity and less about the historical retelling. So, an example of that is John doesn't include parables because in this gospel, it's not trying to focus on Jesus as a teacher like the other three. It's talking about Jesus being God. The next thing I want to talk about to point out a difference among the Gospels, I'm going to talk about the beginning of each Gospel. So, the Gospel of Matthew starts with directly a lineage for Jesus, which is something that Luke also has, but it doesn't start there. So, Matthew starts with the genealogy of Jesus, starting with Abraham. So, Matthew's gospel was written to the Jews, so the genealogy of Jesus starts with Abraham. So it shows the lineage of the patriarchy, really, and then it immediately goes into the nativity with Jesus being born and wise men showing up. They leave to Egypt, and then it goes. They go back to Nazareth, and then John shows up, and John prepares the way for Jesus. Mark skips a bit of that. Mark is known as the immediately gospel because it was written to the Romans, who at the time were kind of like people today who like superhero films exclusively. The Romans just liked stories that like got to the punch like immediately. It was just like, okay, we're in the story. And so the Gospel of Mark just starts with John the Baptist just baptizing people immediately. So, yeah, that is Mark, which Mark is currently my favorite gospel, so that's not a criticism towards Mark. Mark is very effective at what it does, and that's why I like it so much. The gospel, according to Luke, is slightly different. It first starts with a dedication to a person called Theophilus, which we don't know exactly who that was. There are a lot of different theories. One that I've heard that I like, though I don't necessarily agree with, is that Theophilus is just a stand-in for the church. Theophilus basically means lover of God, which is what the church is as the bride of God, or the bride of Christ, I should say. So Theophilus and the church basically do mean the same thing, more or less. So that's an interesting starting point. But actually, now Luke starts a little bit earlier than the Gospel of Mark, and it starts when Gabriel, the angel, delivers a message to Zacharias, John the Baptist's father, talking about John's coming. So that's important. It's John prepares the way for Jesus, so you need to understand John before you can understand Jesus. That makes sense. We then move into John's birth and then eventually Jesus's birth. And Luke, if you're ever reading anything from the Bible at Christmas time, 9 out of 10 times it'll be from Luke. The other 1 out of 10 times will be from Matthew, because they're the only two that have a Christmas narrative in it. And Luke's is by far the most comprehensive. Luke also then contains a genealogy of Jesus, but it differs from Matthew for reasons that I'm not going to get into in this episode and probably won't get to for a long time. But it is very interesting. I'd highly recommend looking it up if you don't already understand. Basically, the reason for it is because Matthew's gospel was written to the Jews and Luke's was written to the Gentiles. So they're just written by different people for different people. So they're both proper genealogies, just following different trees, basically. Now, John's gospel starts a little bit further back than Mark's, a little bit further back than Luke's as well, and Matthew's, further back than Matthew's. It starts at the beginning, as I read to you. In the beginning was the Word. Now is the part that I feel I should probably read from the Old Testament, and for that we are going all the way back to Genesis 1:1. John 1:1 mirrors Genesis 1:1. I'll begin reading in Genesis. We're basically going to just read the first 2 verses. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So, Genesis 1:1 tells us, in the beginning there was basically nothing, and God was there alone. So, going back to John, if I can find it, we are then told in the beginning was the Word. Word is capital here, so it's a title. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So we are immediately told this Word was God. It says it, and the Word was God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. So, John, as I said before, is about the divinity of Jesus, and there you have it. It first, first verse, second verse, the whole 1 through 5 is about how Jesus is God. Now, in him was life. In case you're wondering why why we know the word was Jesus, is because it starts calling him, like capital H, him, and that just continues throughout the rest of the book, is capital H for him. Closing thought for me. I would say I think John should be the first gospel. It should be John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, if you ask me, because then you still have the 3 synoptic gospels together, and then you have just John at the beginning that parallels the New Testament with the Old Testament. It helps establish the idea of the different covenant, basically, between the between Christians and Jews. I mean, it helps show that the Old Testament and the New Testament are separate, but the New Testament, as Jesus, like in the words of Jesus, he didn't come to destroy the old law, but to fulfill it. So it would be a nice parallel there with John at the beginning. And I understand why Matthew is, because Matthew is the one that was written to the Jews, so it makes a nice like transition going from Malachi to Matthew. But I don't really care, to be honest. If you're reading your Bible straight through, you're going to be able to read any of the 4 Gospels after reading the Old Testament, and you'll understand how Jesus fulfills all the Old Testament prophecies. So it doesn't really matter that Matthew comes first, but I just wish John was before the synoptics. I think that would just make a little bit more sense to me. But yeah, that's my closing thought. I know this was a short episode because I didn't go over any previous segments, and that's okay sometimes. The truth is, I'm a college student, a full-time college student, a full-time employee, and I just don't have time to do more stuff all the time. So I'm looking forward to doing more Bible study type videos. And that's not to say I won't have full episodes of The Christian Show in the future. Episode 9 will come eventually. Though if I'm numbering them like symphonies now, there is the 9 symphony curse, so maybe I should make like Mahler and not make a 9th episode, because then I die. I'm just kidding, I'm not superstitious. Yeah, so that was the introduction to the Gospel according to John. With that, thank you all for watching. I will see you all again next week. Have a good night.